Welcome back to another Kray video. Please subscribe to our YouTube channel so you don't miss any videos. And for people really interested in the Krays, check out our private Facebook group, Krays, Crime Lords of London. We're a friendly and moderated group which has been running since January 2018. Please come and give us a try.
Hello, my name is Norman Lucas. I am a British crime journalist and author, known for my work covering high-profile criminal cases and gangland figures. I worked as a crime correspondent for the Sunday Mirror newspaper and wrote several books on true crime subjects. As a crime reporter for the Sunday Mirror, I covered significant crime stories in Britain. I had cultivated sources and contacts within the criminal underworld. Undercover, I worked my way into the inner circle of the notorious Kray twins to gather information for my reporting. Through my books and newspaper reporting, I provided the public with detailed accounts of some of the most shocking and notable crimes in British history, helping to shape public understanding of true crime and its perpetrators. I hope you enjoy my story. For some reason, Peter McDonough, the 45-year-old former head waiter at Covent Garden Opera House, felt sympathetic to the old clergyman who was existing on a pension of a bare £5 a week. Jack Spot's trial had been set for September 19th, and on September 13th, Andrews was sitting in the lounge of the Cumberland Hotel, Marble Arch, when he was approached by McDonough. The reason for Andrews's presence there was never clear, but he was almost entirely without funds, and McDonough asked him if he would like to make some money. Andrews replied that he would. McDonough then said, "You can earn some money if you would care to say 6 words." Andrews was somewhat puzzled until McDonough explained that he would have to give evidence in the Spot case. The clergyman did not hesitate to agree, and was at once taken to see a group of men in another part of the hotel. The men were Bernard Shack, known in the gang world as Sonny the Yank, and Morris Goldstein, known as Moisha Blue Boy. Both were great friends of Spot. Shack was a seaman from Stepney and one of Spot's boyhood friends. In 1931, he had been bound over for being a suspected person, and in 1939, he was fined £1 for striking a bookmaker in an argument. In 1939, he was jailed for 6 months on a charge of unlawful wounding, which emerged from the same incident as that involving Jack Spot, and for which Spot received his only prison sentence. Goldstein was a Hackney bookmaker who in 1938 had been discharged under the Probation of Offenders Act and ordered to pay 5 guineas costs for unlawful wounding during an argument. He had also been convicted twice for gaming offences. He too had been a boyhood friend of Spot's, and according to Mr. Justice Ormerod, he was the ringleader in the conspiracy involving Andrews. When McDonough told these two at the Cumberland Hotel that Andrews was willing to give evidence on Spot's behalf, they were delighted, and Goldstein persuaded Andrews to go to a flat in Hyde Park Mansions, Spot's home, the following day, where he would be given more details about the affair. The next morning, a car picked up Andrews and deposited him at Spot's home, where he met Margaret Comer, known as Rita, the gangster's wife. Several people were with her, and according to Andrews, other men drifted in and out during his visit. A group explained to him the nature of the identification evidence he was to give, and Goldstein suggested that it might be a good thing if he went to Frith Street and familiarized himself with the greengrocer's shop and the surroundings. So far as Andrews could recall, he thought that it was Spot's wife who promised him that he would receive £25 before going into the witness box and £25 when he emerged. He was given £1 for a taxi home, and the next day again visited Hyde Park Mansions. After discussing the previous day's conversation, he was given what he thought was £15 by Goldstein, but which was in fact only £13. The following Sunday, he went to Frith Street and inspected the scene of the Dimes-Comer fight. The news that Andrews had broken down and talked to detectives swiftly spread to Spot and his henchmen, and while the police were obtaining warrants for the arrest of those who had been involved in the plot to pervert the course of justice, Spot and Rita, on October 7th, 1955, left for Ayr. They had caught a train from Euston the previous night and embarked upon the Cambria for Dunlaogair. From there, they took a taxi to Dublin and stayed in an hotel before starting off to join their 2 children who had travelled to a village outside Dublin a week earlier and were being cared for by relatives. At 3 a.m. on Saturday, October 22nd, a Dublin police car drew up outside the block of flats where the Comers were staying, and a quarter of an hour later, Margaret Comer left with a detective sergeant for Bridewell Police Station, where she was handed over to Detective Inspector, later Detective Superintendent Eric Shepherd of London's West End Police Station, and Woman Detective Sergeant Shirley Beck. The Metropolitan Police officers told Margaret Comer that she was being arrested on a warrant for conspiracy, and she immediately asked with how many people she was alleged to have conspired. After being told, she admitted the charge and said Moisha and the others said the old parson would give evidence for a few quid. "I would like to know who told you he was at the flat," meaning Hyde Park Mansions. Mrs. Comer and the detectives boarded a plane for England, and Mrs. Comer was taken to Bow Street Police Station and formally charged. Later, she was remanded to Holloway Jail for a week. The 4 charged Mrs. Comer, then 27, McDonough, Shack, and Goldstein, stood trial at the end of November 1955, when the Solicitor General, Sir Harry Hilton Foster, QC, led the prosecution. He told the court of Andrews' story to the police and commented, "He is very old and of an age when some of us may hope to be free from the temptations of this world." He referred to the clergyman as an old villain and warned the jury that they should treat Andrews' evidence carefully and see that it was corroborated before accepting it. Andrews was cross-examined in the witness box by Treasury Counsel, Mr. Reginald Seaton, who again took him through his story. Andrews explained the transaction between him and the 4 in the dock, pointing out Sonny the Yank and Moisha Blue Boy as 2 of the men at Hyde Park Mansions when he was taken there by Peter McDonough. Andrews insisted that McDonough had wanted to do him a good turn, knowing that he was hard up, and said, "I am perfectly certain in my mind that he had no idea any more than I had that this wretched business would lead to such vast proportions or become so serious." He stated that McDonough had taken no part in the wild promises that the others had made regarding benefits Andrews would get if he did as they wanted, including an assurance that he would never again be in want. He also said that Mr. Perkoff, Spot's solicitor, was unaware of the conspiracy and had had no part in it. The clergyman admitted that he had never met Comer when he made the statement about having seen the knife fight, and admitted that he had not been in Frith Street on the morning it had taken place. In fact, everything he had said about the fight had been a tissue of lies. Counsel for the accused also examined Andrews, and Mr. Ash Lincoln QC for Peter McDonough asked, "Do you ever tell the truth?" Andrews replied, "Sometimes." He admitted that he had done many dishonorable things in his life, but denied that he had ever tried to obtain money on the strength of a fictitious story, that his niece, also fictitious, was due to inherit £100,000 when she reached the age of 21 years, and denied that he had ever conducted a bogus marriage. He agreed, however, that he had many debts and had borrowed money which he had failed to pay back. Cross-examined by counsel for Goldstein and Shack, Andrews stuck to his story that he was now telling the truth, and that at Spot's trial he had told a pack of lies. He also stood firmly by his story of the events that had occurred at Spot's flat in Hyde Park Mansions. He spent 7 hours in the witness box, denying that he had altered his testimony in order to make money from the Daily Sketch, as well as having his hotel bill paid by that newspaper, and that, because he had lied once, he was lying again. All the defendants denied the conspiracy charge, but Andrews' evidence was believed by the jury, and all 4 accused were found guilty. Moisha Blue Boy was jailed for 2 years, and Sonny, the Yank, and McDonough were sentenced to 12 months imprisonment. Throughout, Spot had been fearful of the result of the trial, because he was desperately worried that his wife would be jailed. When she was fined £50, the judge commented upon her temptation to help her husband. Spot was beside himself with joy. Once again, he announced that he was leaving the racetracks. He said he intended to open a restaurant. The evening of May 2nd, 1956, was a warm and pleasant one, as Jack Spot and his wife Margaret, or Rita as he called her, strolled along a quiet pavement towards their apartment at Hyde Park Mansions, a solid, red-bricked and bow-windowed building. They looked just like any other couple going back to their children after spending an hour or so with friends at the local. As the couple approached their home, men who had been concealed in the shadows suddenly converged on the couple wielding the standard weapons of the underworld, razors, koshes, and crowbars, plus a shillelagh. Blood spurted from Jack Spot's face as a razor carved out the most fearful wound he was ever to receive before he was bludgeoned to his knees. His wife tried desperately to protect him from the murderous attack, but there was little she could do. He rolled over in a pool of his own blood, and his assailants then put the boot into him before vanishing into the darkness. Police cars and an ambulance sped to the scene of yet another violent chapter in London's gang war, and as Spot fought to retain consciousness, he whispered the names of some of his attackers. Rita sat in the ambulance with her husband as he was rushed to hospital. She was bruised and cut, and she, too, identified some of the night's vendors of violence, naming Billy Hill as the leader of the gang. Detectives stayed at Spot's bedside day and night, and as soon as he had sufficiently recovered, questioned him about the attack, With heavy bandages hiding the 78 stitches in his face that made communication difficult and painful, Spot repeatedly shook his head when police officers asked him if he had recognized members of the gang. He was scared by what he had disclosed on the way to the hospital and of what might happen to him, his wife, and children if he squealed. Rita, though, refused to allow herself to be silenced by her husband's fears. She named Billy Hill and 6 other men whom she alleged had taken part in the chiving and beating of her man. One of them fled to Ireland immediately after the attack, but returned a few days later because he believed the heat was off. This man, Francis, Mad Frankie Fraser, was alleged to have said when arrested by the police, "Look here, you know I was in it, but you've got to prove it." The second man the police charged was Robert Warren, 28, of Islington. Detectives were certain that Spot had been the victim of gangland vengeance following the fracas with Italian Albert Dimes and the events of the subsequent trial. Rita disclosed that she had received letters and telephone calls threatening her that if she continued to talk, she would be disfigured and her 2 children kidnapped. Although Spot refused to give evidence, the police proceeded with the case against Fraser and Warren, and the trial of the 2 men opened at the Old Bailey on the 15th of June 1956. The prosecuting counsel described the attack on Spot to a jury that must have been puzzled to find the victim of the affair silent, but his wife determined to identify his assailants. Mr. Patrick Marinan, a tall, burly barrister and former university boxing blue from Ulster, appeared for Warren and asked Rita if she had named Billy Hill and some of his henchmen because she wanted to rid the underworld of Hill and Dimes so that her husband could rule London. With some contempt, she replied, "I just want to be left alone with my husband and children." Fraser denied having played any part in the attack and declared that on the night it had taken place, he was in Brighton, where he was recognized as a respected citizen. He also challenged the statement the police had alleged he made when he was arrested. He said that what in fact he had said was, "Look here, if you know I did it, you can prove it." Summing up at the end of the hearing, Mr. Justice Donovan said to the jury, "You may think you have to deal with a pretty unsavory lot of people who indulge in the activities of racing, employing race gang warfare, and people who, you may think, contributed nothing to the community. If this sort of thing is allowed to spread, it would not be safe for any of us to walk the streets. Mrs. Comer, Rita, had no reason to lie," he said, "and might very well expect repercussions from the violent kind of people in whose world she lived." After retiring for 2 hours, the jury found Warren and Fraser guilty, and they were each sentenced to 7 years imprisonment. Fraser had 15 previous convictions, including offenses for razor slashing and attacking a man with a broken bottle. He had twice been certified insane, which had led to the underworld christening him Mad Frankie. Warren had 5 convictions, but none of them involved violence. Throughout the trial, Billy Hill and some of his associates had stayed close to the Old Bailey, and the jury's verdict against 2 men whom were certainly Hill's associates heightened the enmity that existed between Spot and Hill. The police considered that Mrs. Comer was still in danger and continued to give her protection. A few weeks after the trial, 3 more men were arrested in connection with the attack: William Billy Boy Blythe, an army deserter and an experienced chiv specialist who once slashed a policeman so badly that the officer had to have 20 stitches in his face, William Edward Dennis, a car dealer, and Robert Rossi. Blythe and Rossi were detained in Dublin, and 2 Scotland Yard officers, Detective Inspector Thomas Butler, famed for his arrest of the Great Train Robbery Gang, and Detective Sergeant Peter Vibart flew to Ireland to bring them back to London. Both were great friends of Billy Hill. Dennis was arrested at a bungalow in Brighton. On October 16, 1956, the 3 men were found guilty of wounding Spot. Rossi and Dennis were sentenced to 4 years imprisonment. Blythe was jailed for 5 years but died the following year. He was accorded one of the underworld's most spectacular funerals in Clerkenwell, London's Little Italy, where he had grown up. There were 12 Rolls Royces in the procession, and the total value of the wreaths was at least £1,500. They bore such sentiments as Sadly Missed, The End, To Uncle Bill, At Rest Bill from Billy Hill, and With Deepest Sympathy, Ruby Sparks. 5 days after the trial of Fraser and Warren, Mr. Justice Donovan sentenced 2 other Chiv specialists to terms of 7 years imprisonment. The names of Billy Hill and Jack Spot were again mentioned at this hearing, and references were made to a race gang feud. 2 hoodlums, Richard Dickie Frett and David Rosa, had attacked John Frederick Carter of Sydney Square, Peckham. Frett, when asked by prosecuting counsel if he knew Hill and Comer, had replied, "No, only what I have read in the newspapers." Carter was a police informer, but previously he had been a black marketeer and a collector in a protection racket. These latter activities began in 1951, when on one November morning he walked out of Wandsworth Prison after serving a 5-year sentence for slashing a bookmaker, to find his small collection of gangsters, including burglars and men he had met while inside, waiting for him. They pressed £500 in pound notes into his hand and took him to Covent Garden, where the public houses open at dawn for market workers. One of the men offered him a partnership in a Soho drinking club, which was to become Carter's headquarters for the next 3 years. Situated on the 2nd floor of a dingy building in Rupert Street, the club was a typical Soho den, sparsely furnished with a jukebox and a bar. It was the haunt of thugs, prostitutes, and confidence tricksters. Within a week of his release from jail, Carter and his team had persuaded 15 licensees to pay protection money, and his personal income climbed to around £500 a week as time went on. He always carried a razor and flick knife, and in 1956 he found himself in the dock at the Old Bailey, charged with causing grievous bodily harm to one of his victims. For a reason Carter could never understand, Judge Arvold did not send him to prison, but instead gave him a last chance to go straight. It was then that Carter became an informer and a victim of vengeance taken by Frett and Rosa. The 2 men were defended by Mr. Patrick Marinan, who asked a detective in cross-examination whether Carter was an associate of a South London gang. The judge ruled that the question was irrelevant. The prosecution explained that Carter was attacked in Lambeth while on his way home from a public house where he had been drinking with his wife. He managed to wrestle a knife from one of his attackers before dashing into a house and locking himself in a room with Frett and Rosa in pursuit. The 2 men were alleged to have smashed in the door and to have attacked Carter with knives, a hammer, and a shillelagh. Carter fought the pair for 20 minutes until they fled, leaving him with wounds that required 60 stitches. Before the opening of the trial, Carter had become a frightened man, so that when called upon to testify, claimed that he was unable to recognize his assailants in the dock. Earlier, of course, he had put the finger on one of them, and his wife picked out both prisoners. Now she, too, was no longer prepared to clinch their identity. The judge said that the question arose as to whether the Carters' reluctance to identify the men was genuine or false. False because of fear. Addressing the jury, he said, "It may well appear to you that there is a great deal more to this case than Carter's uncertainty in the witness box. If gangs can cut people up and then by some means or other their victims after first, then a very ugly situation is developing, and it would lead not merely to the breakdown of criminal law, but of all law. Although there was no evidence that threats had been made, it was a matter for the jury, as men and women of the world, to consider for themselves." 60 minutes after the judge had sent the jury out, they returned and delivered verdicts of guilty against Fred and Rosa, and then heard some startling character evidence. The police revealed that Fred had 8 previous convictions. He was a violent man who associated with West End gangs, and with another man, had been jailed in 1950 for slashing the face of a motorist with whom the pair had had an argument. He earned his living by crime and was a member of the racing fraternity. Rosa also had 8 previous convictions and was an associate of West End gangsters. Mr. Marinen's probing into Carter's possible connection with the South London gang underlined the possibility that 2 small gangs, one from North London and the other from the South, had already clashed, and that a new struggle for power was being waged to decide which mob should control Soho. That's all for this episode, my friends. Hope you enjoyed it, and I'll see you in the next one.
Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed the video, please join our Facebook group. It's called Krays Crime Lords of London. We're a friendly moderated group with over 1,000 Kray and other celebrated gangster videos available for view. There's also thousands of images in the photos sections. The link for the group is in the YouTube description section. I hope we see you there soon.
Leave a like and subscribe.